All right. Welcome back and welcome back, Bernard. We had a little stream restart here just to get everything up and running smoothly for folks. And we're just going to jump right back in to WAAPI and the success of our first Hello Wise. Take it away.
Yeah. So far, we were able to connect to Wise. So this is what this script does: connects to Wise, gets some information, and then print it. So that's what we did so far. So if you just joined the stream, don't worry, we're not very far in the WAPI code. So one call so far, the call function, and we got the information about the current Wise instance that is running. So I think we're ready to get to the next function. Maybe another function that is convenient is get project info. So if we look again with the documentation, so press back, get project info just here. So get project info, again, just some result. It takes no argument and then returns some information about the project. So I'm going to run it again, this script, and this time we should get information about the project. So we get directories, languages, platforms, that kind of thing. Great. So I think we're ready to go to the next level. One thing that WAPI is useful for is importing audio file to Wise. So you have your list of thousands of files, WAV files that you want to import in the project, and well, you could just drag and drop the files into Wise, but it would be better if script was doing something smart for you. So WAPI can help with that. So we'll look at how we can import a few files. So a good way to get started about import is to look at the import function.
And Bernard, I just wanted to unpack really quick some terminology, right? Function, these are helpers within the API that you can use. And then arguments are, how would you describe an argument then in the context of a function?
Yeah, the function is something that you invoke. So from the script point of view, I'm going to invoke a function. And the arguments is what you pass to the function. So Wise is going to receive the argument. So an example here, if I want to import a WAV file, I'm going to pass the path of the WAV file as an argument. And
Cool.
then Wise will return success or error based on what happened.
Perfect. Thank you.
So the two functions that we looked at so far, they did not have any argument. So the only thing that we specify is the name of the function when we call it. But now we're going to need arguments because the functions that we're using require arguments, and they're defined in the documentation here. And import function is quite flexible, and it can do many things. So there's a lot of arguments possible, but it could be a lot to digest if you're new to Wise or WAPI. But conveniently, we have some example here at the bottom. So every function that you find in the Wise authoring API reference has example at the bottom. So in this case, we could use one of these, this example. We could use, the second one. So importing audio file and creating multiple SoundSFX. That's convenient.
Oh
So
yeah. And that's honestly with my capability where I start. I go right to the examples. There's a little copy paste, and having some success is a great first step. So,
Mhm.
what are we going to do with that?
Well, let's do that. Copy paste. So, so we're going to take this, and we're going to create an argument variable here. So import arg, which is the name of our variable. Args with s because it's arguments, and I'm going to paste this. I'm going to use the auto format of VS Code. Whoops. So it's auto format is broken somehow. I don't know why.
All right.
Okay. So, but it doesn't matter. So I already have a couple of WAV files on this project because the example obviously has files that doesn't exist on my computer.
Sure.
So I can right click here, copy, path. I'm going to paste it here. And since we're doing Python, well, strings in Python, the backslash is an escape character. So you see those weird things. So I need to either double the backslash or specify it's a raw string. So the backslash are not escaped.
Got it.
Paste it over here. So a different WAV file. It's a raw string also. Okay, so we'll a bit dissect. Before we run, we'll dissect a bit this code to understand what it's doing. So import args, that's the name of our variable, and the instruction here on top says it's going to be a SFX, so it's not going to be language specific like English, French, or other language. And also we have an array of import files. So for each file, we have an object in the project that is going to be created. So in this case, we have actor mixer, default work unit, and then we have types. Here we have a sequence container and a name, and followed by SoundSFX and a name. So you see this the same container for both, but they have different sound names. So next thing we need to do is pass the argument here, but also we need to have the correct function name. So let's copy paste this function name over here.
Great.
So paste here. Make sure you have no space at the end like this, because sometimes when we copy paste, there's those spaces. So I think we're ready to try. So let's put it on the side, and let's have our empty project on the other side. So let's
this is exciting.
try. Yeah. Oh, I see the expand just appeared. We have our container created, test0, and R2 sound SFX created. So it worked. So this function has been around for many years, I think since the beginning of WAAPI. And this function is oriented around audio files. So you specify an audio file, and then you specify where it's going to be imported. And what we did in version 2023.1, we created another way to import audio file, which is not based on audio file, but based on Wwise objects. So each of these sounds and containers and work units are objects, and we'll talk a bit more about that. So I think we're ready to create a new Python file. So I'm going to copy paste this.
Yeah. Let's keep
So
building.
this one is going to be import or Object.Set. It's going to be the function that we So I'm going to remove the argument, and we'll take a look at the documentation first before we do anything.
Great.
So let's go back here. So this is our WAPI reference page, and we'll be looking at Object.Set. Okay, so we have our function here. So Object.Set, as the name says, it's setting things into objects. So again, this one has a lot of arguments possible. It's very deep and flexible. It's like a Swiss knife of function.
Yeah.
So you see that we have a lot of examples also. So there's a lot of things you can do, and there's even much more than this that you can do, but the examples are a good way to get started. Maybe a good way to understand a bit what it's doing is this one here. It says setting the values of the name, notes, a property, and a reference. So a bunch of things. But to get
Great.
started, we'll create a sound in our project just to. So I'm going to undo everything so we get back to empty. So I'm going to create a sound called my sound. So you see it's red because it has no WAV file in it, but it's a clean sound, so everything is as default.
Perfect.
So I'm going to copy this, and then this time it's going to be called set args, but the name of the variable doesn't matter really. It's just in.
It's just a place to start.
Yeah. So I'm going to paste this over here, and we'll try to a bit understand what's going on again. So objects defines an array of objects. In this case, there's one item in the array. The first item says what object we are setting. We're setting the my sound object that we just created a minute ago. And we say we're going to set the name, the notes, the volume, let's say minus 5.7, and also the output bus. So you see there's two types of syntax. So the one with ampersand, like volume, and the one with no ampersand. So object names nodes are more like the core architecture of the authoring, and those with the ampersand are specific to the different object types that we have in Wwise. So you might ask, well, where do I find all those, we call them properties. So if we search now for Wwise Object Reference, we also have this convenient page where we list all the different types that we support, and we can scroll through sound because we're setting properties on a sound, and this is going to list all the properties that you can access through WAAPI. So in this case, volume. So we have a lot of different volumes in Wwise, but the one that we're interested in is this one, volume. And the output bus is also somewhere on this page. So output bus is here. So output bus, this one is actually a reference. It's pointing to another object in the project. So here, yeah. So output bus, it says it's going to do to be environment bus. We don't have an environment bus yet, so well, we could create it. So let's go here. So environment bus. Okay. So my sound is still bare bones.
Default and empty.
Yeah. So we could try to call. Oh, we need to fix this first.
Yep.
So I'm going to go back here.
This is the function that we're calling.
Okay, and we have our arguments that we pass to the function. And let's minimize this and then run this. Error. So we got an error. So what's going on? Platform ID is unknown. Oh yes, there was another argument here at the bottom. In the example, we have this example of how to specify a platform, but we'll just remove it because it's an optional argument, and we don't need it for this example. So
and that's an interesting question. Are some arguments required and some are optional?
Absolutely. So if we go back to the documentation of the function, so there are two types of argument. The one with the star are required.
Gotcha.
Like platform has no star, so
Perfect.
Optional argument.
Awesome, thank you.
So I'm going to run this again and hope that no error this time. Okay. So we got our volume set to minus 5.7. Our new name is there. We even have some notes hidden here. Notes are being set. And the upper bus also. So we have everything as requested. So
cool. A bit of a clarification. It looks like the it's an at sign or at symbol instead of an ampersand. The ampersand is the little curly guy, and that is an at symbol.
Oh right, yeah, I said the wrong word. Yeah, it's at. Yeah.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Sorry about that.
Thanks for the clarification, and yeah, we're right there with you. Language, it's real, and we're all working together. So thanks for that in the chat.
Yeah, cool. Absolutely. Sorry about that. My English is
no, you're doing great, and I didn't catch it either. My English is not great. Cool. Good success, Bernard.
Okay, so now we're able to set properties, names, and nodes. The next step is to try to import WAV files, because this function can also import WAV files. So to do that, well, this time we could try to make some music. So let's go back to the examples, the bottom. This one, WAV files. Yeah, could try this one. So importing two WAV files into a music segment and create two music tracks. So I'm going to copy this. It's going to be easy.
Make sure we get that argument in there, or the function in there too, while you're at it.
Yeah, it's the same function. So it's again a set function.
Great.
And we're just passing different argument and see what this function can do. So in the earlier example, we were setting names, volume, etc. Now we're setting children. So it's a bit different. Let's start from scratch. So I'm going to delete this. Whoops, not this. This. So we have an empty music hierarchy. And so what this function does, takes the default work unit, and it says, now the children will be this array. So the array specify at the moment one object of type music segment with a name. We'll call it my segment. And it's going to specify import instructions. I have over here drum and bass. We could use this. So bass, copy path. Again, I'm going to replace this to maximize. Okay, it's a raw string and some drum here. Okay, raw string again.
Cool.
So we're telling to import two files into the segment. That's what it's doing. It's going to be the same thing as if we drag two WAV files over the segment in Wwise. However, there's no pop-up audio file importer showing up. It's directly doing it.
Right.
Is there anything else before we run? Yeah, there's another argument here on name conflict. So this is important to understand also. So if we run this script multiple times, well, the second time we run it, the segment will already exist. So what happens if the object already exists? In this case, it says merge. So it's going to keep the existing object that we already had, and it's going to try to merge the instruction that we have here with the existing one. There's also a choice of replace and also rename, so give a new name every time. But merge is a good choice for us for now. So I think we're ready to try. So I'm going to run this and hope for the best. Oh, okay. So we have our segment created. I can click it, and we have our two tracks in the segment. So it's a success. However,
Nice. Okay, a question coming in from the chat. Do waves get added to the root of the original folder by default with this method since it skips the pop-up?
yes, it does. However, it is possible to specify the location, I think. Is it possible? Import. Right. Okay. So yes. So we have there. So we at the moment there's only the audio file field that we specified, but there's also another field called original subfolder, in which you can specify a subfolder in which the WAV file will be copied.
Nice. Great question and great way to extend the script that we're building if you want that WAV file to land in a specific destination in the originals folder. Nice.
Absolutely. And is it also a way to use a base64 representation for the file in case that you're not on the same computer, that the script is not on the same computer as Wwise. So if they're on different computers, well, the path here is not going to be found by Wwise because it's a different computer. So you could use base64 representation to do the same work, but that's more advanced, not for today.
You did blow my mind with the base64 example, but I get it. It allows for a level of abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Okay, so I was to say, okay, there's something wrong here with our segment. Well, there's two things that are wrong. So we have the wrong tempo, and also the EnterCue ExitCue is not right. It's not the correct place. So we'll try to fix that. So, okay, so earlier we saw type equal music segment. I think it's time to go back to our Wwise object reference. So we were looking at the sound in the previous example, but there's also the segment here. Segment or music segment. So let's open the documentation for the segment. And we see there's a bunch of properties. And there's one called MIDI tempo source. That's not what we want. Override MIDI tempo. Tempo. Okay, so there's a way to set tempo. So we can try it. So we saw in the previous example, we were able to set the volume with the @ character and specify volume. We can also specify tempo the same way. So in this case, it's 106, because I know. So we can try it. So I'm going to undo, clear, start, and then run again. And now we have our tempo set correctly. We have our 4 bars matching the end here, all good. Now we can try to set the entry and exit cues correctly. So we can look for cues in this page. And now we find it, but it's a bit different from the other properties. So for the volume, it was a number, tempo also a number. We saw also earlier the output bus, it was a reference, so pointing to another object in the project. This one is a list. So we have another type here. List and a possible value, possible types are music cue, which is expected. So let's try. So same syntax again, so cues with the S, but this time it's a list. So in Python, it's an array. So we're using the square brackets. I'm going to go back to this reference page, find music cue. And now we have 4 types, 4 properties. So it's a bit similar now to how we define our segment. We have type and name. So we're going to declare an object, type, small letters, okay, type, music cue, okay. The name, we don't care, but we still need to specify, so empty. And the other one that we need to set is the cue type. So we have entry, exit, and user. So let's specify an entry cue first. Well, it's not a string actually, it's a int, so integer, and 0, 1, 2. So we need to specify 0 for entry cue. And the time in milliseconds. Oops, and this one, oh no, sorry, I was confused. So name, cue type with the @ because it's a property, 0, and then time, ms, and time 0 is our entry cue at the beginning. Okay, that's the first entry cue, comma over here. Okay, so I'm going to copy this, paste another one, this one, cue type 1.
And that's an exit cue?
Exactly. And what's the time we need? So to know the time, what we can do maybe is take this sound, open it in the wave viewer. Okay, and then we have our base. It's 6.785 seconds, so I'm going to put it here. But it's in milliseconds, so 6.785 milliseconds. Okay. And while we're at it, we could create a custom cue. So cue type 2. This time, let's say 2 seconds. Okay. So we have our script.
Okay, let's give our custom cue a name.
Oh, yes, you're right. Hello. There's another thing we need to set before we run. So we saw earlier that we had on-name conflict. So that's for the objects in the project if their name already, this object with this name already exists. There's also another one called list mode, because we're also, well, we saw that the children is working with arrays, but the cues is also an array. So what happens if we already have cues? Because as soon as we create a segment in Wise, it's going to create the cues for you.
Yep.
But now we're specifying different cues, so we need to say list mode replace all, because we don't want to use the default cues. List mode replace all. Okay, so we could try. we're ready to try and run it.
Yeah.
Okay, I did not delete the previous segment, but yeah, so we see it's
There it is.
merging the previous segment and replacing the cues. So now we have our cues correctly set and our hello custom cue created.
Nice. Yeah, and this is, this feels great to step through the process, and really where you take this in your pipeline is towards automating common tasks so that it speeds up your workflow over time. So really people are looking to apply techniques like this to repetitive tasks or tasks that can be optimized using WAAPI so that this can go much faster during development when they need it to.
Obviously, if you're only doing one segment like this, it's going to be longer with the script. But yeah, as soon as you're doing a lot of them and you want to ensure that they're strict and meet your, let's say, your conventions or requirement, then it can be a very reliable way to create your objects.
Yeah, what a great example. And speaking of examples, each of those functions at the bottom of the page, you've got, a list of suggestions of how to use them. You can grab, copy, and paste the function and the arguments into test scripts and be up and running with some of these things very quickly, getting them working, and then using them to optimize, extend, and, like you said, create these workflows that are strict, that are repeatable, and yeah, can supercharge your workflow.
Mm-hmm. And the Object.Set function, it can go very far. So you could even create your game syncs like switch groups, game parameters, events, your buses, all into one call. So you can create those complex hierarchy. This one was simple. It's just a segment with 2 tracks, but you can go much further. And actually, I did 2 blogs on a couple months ago, and one of them is about this, and there's a much further, an example that goes much further. So the example in the blog shows how to create a music switch container with switch group and switches. Also the music playlist container and creating the playlists and creating those segment and tracks together with the cues and everything. So you get the whole music hierarchy created in one call.
Great. And so for folks who are out there and going to dig into this after the fact, we've got the Audiokinetic blog featuring the resources that Bernard's talking about across both WAAPI and WAQL, along with a whole lot of other resources, pulling in ways that folks have used it out in the community, development with our Wwise transfer application, Soundly, someone who wrote a blog about integrating WAAPI with Max 8, or creating temporary VO assets automatically with WAAPI and text-to-speech. A ton of great resources at this Audiokinetic blog, so be sure to dig in there after the stream and look for some other real-world examples.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
So the import function that we just saw inside the Object.Set is new to WISE 23.1. It's one of the new features we added. And maybe we can take a few moments to look at the list of things that we also added to WAAPI for the release.
Sounds great. One question coming in: is there a way to modify the music clip's position in the timeline of a music segment with WAAPI?
Good question. At the moment, no. That's one of the limitations that we had to let for this release, but no, the only thing you can do right now is 1 clip per track, and it's going to be at the beginning.
There you go. Thanks for the question. And again, these are things that were actively evolving over time. So as it was deprioritized for a more recent release, it could find its way back into the priority list in the future. And WAAPI is a tool that we're using internally all the time. And so we're building this for ourselves, continuing to extend its functionality for how we're using it internally as part of our development. And meanwhile, that benefits everyone outside of Audiokinetic who can use this as part of their pipeline. So it's a great tool that continues to evolve. Yeah, thanks for the question. We've got someone who loves WAAPI and the new updates. So good work, Bernard.
So also about new functions that we added in the latest release. So more convenience for opening, creating, closing projects. So we got new functions for that. Also more control over mute and solo. More control over link and unlink. So when you want to have different values for different platforms, that's all accessible now. Also, we gave access to the state page over here. So now you can create your states for your object through WAAPI. More profiler functions. So we already had a bunch of profiler functions in WAAPI. We added more. So now we have CPU, usage, loaded media, performance monitor, stream, and the ability to save the capture also. And the big also change is the added support for source control. So all the common operation you do with source control are accessible, but also all the existing function of WAAPI that were accessing, for example, word units, now they get the proper source control support. So, for example, if you create a word unit with Object.Set, it's going to do the right thing for you on the source control level. So that an example of that could be you have, again, thousands of WAV files in your original folder, and you realize that your naming convention need to change because your project is growing. So what do? You need to move your file around, rename them, or you could do that with the file manager in Wwise, but it could be a long task if you have thousands of files. So maybe you want to write a script that's going to rename the file for you and does all the difficult tasks for you, and also make sure that the word units that have a reference to those files are not broken. So Wwise is going to take care of everything for you. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, new functions also for logging. There's also a new Lua interpreter in Wwise. It's still internal, but yeah, it's there on WAAPI. Yeah, more Perforce working it, and yeah, we also added a lot of more control over the music objects. For example, we got I talked about music object, but also stingers, transitions, playlists. We got standard, also random sequence container that is accessible now, markers, and audio source, and the music switch and dialogue event. Yeah, plenty of new things.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's also some resources that we make available for folks getting started with WAAPI as well.
Yeah. The getting started. So WAAPI getting started is
WAAPI
it's maybe the place to to start.
Great.
So yeah, it's going to be the hub for you to start whatever language to choose. There's a couple.
All right, hey, welcome. So today we're going to be taking a look
at C++, C#, etc. Yeah.
Nice.
Shall we talk about WAQL?
I think it's time. And if you missed our opening unpacking of these acronyms, of course, we've been talking WAAPI the whole time, which is the Wise Authoring API, and shifting to WAQL, unpacking that one, Wise Authoring Query Language. So we're going to WAQL you over the head with all of these awesome ways that you can reach into the project and get information out of your authoring to use.
So I'm going to switch projects, so we have a bit more content to search. Yeah.
Cool.
So that's the Wise adventure game. And on the side, what I have is the WAQL Playground. If you search for WAQL Playground on the internet, you'll find the GitHub page. That's basically a WAAPI application built into a web page. So this web page actually connects to this. Well, it says, yeah, I'm going to refresh now. It's connected to Wise Adventure Game. So what it does, it allows you to test your queries and see the result live as you play with WAQL. So yeah, quick introduction to WAQL. It's, well, you know, your projects, they can get pretty big, thousands and thousands of objects, and sometimes you need to get control over your data, and WAQL is one way to get your data back and be able to validate, verify, maybe just automate also different things. So we talked also earlier about volume, output bus, all those properties. We'll also see today that, yeah, those are accessible in WAQL. WAQL is, you can use WAQL at different places. So in this example, it's a WAAPI script written in JavaScript. It's using WAQL, but you can also use WAQL at different places in Wise, authoring directly. An example is list view, Project Explorer. Also, you can search, you can use WAQL queries, and also the search toolbar on the top right. We don't see at the moment; it's hidden. So over here, you can also type your WAQL queries. Let's go back here. But yeah, for this example, I'll be using the Playground since it's bigger font, easier to read for the live stream, and also it's very flexible, as you'll see in the demo. Okay, so let's close this and let's do a few queries just to understand a bit how the system works. So the default query that is the Playground is from type sound. So what it's doing under the hood is going to ask Wise, give me your list of all the sounds. Because each query, they need to start somewhere. So
all right,
in this case,
welcome
it's
to Wise
starting
Up on Air.
from the sounds.
I'm Damien Kaspar, product manager here.
So as you see, we have a list of sounds there that is listed, and all of those sounds, they exist also in Wise. And to give you the, so I can copy paste it in the Project Explorer just to give you an example. So we have our results also shown in the Project Explorer here. Same query, but the results are shown differently. Okay, let's take a look at here. So the query can have, there's a couple of keywords that are important to understand. So yeah, the from is one of them. We could use the different types, like from event. It's going to give you all the events. Same principle as from type sound. But we also have from project, which is going to give you the entire project. In this case, we have 5,000 objects. And if you, or before, it's also possible to filter. So if I say, from project, there's too many objects to work with, so maybe I want to reduce the number of objects. So I say where volume is less than 0. So now we only have 298
Nice.
objects. From project is actually not necessary. If I remove from project, some ice falling from the on the window.
Winter in Montreal.
Yeah. So now we got a shorter query. So it's going to, since we did not specify any from, it's going to do the entire project for us. So where volume less than 0, it's a simple query that we can use to filter out objects in the project. We talked about volume. We also talked about tempo. So maybe we can do a search about tempo is different than 120. No, okay. Not a good example.
It would have been with our project where we set it at 106, but in this project, we're all at 120.
So pitch is different than 0. That's another, So we got all the objects with the pitch different than 0, but we don't see the pitch right now because the other field here is what is being returned. So this is the first part of the query. Here says what objects are going to match, and the second part says what part of the object I want to learn about. So the moment we have ID, well, ID we don't need, so we can remove it, but maybe we can add the pitch instead. So pitch. So now we see the pitch here.
Nice.
As a column. We can also ask for the volume. Okay, we have the volume now. So that's where the playground is interesting. You get good control over what is being returned.
And you could copy the same WAQL query into Wwise and have those results returned right inside the authoring application.
Well, the first one, not the second one. So the first one, cool. I can type that, for example, in the list view. It's going to give me the same objects. However, the list view has its own mechanism for columns.
Right.
You can use the configure columns to pick which column you want to see. But that's user interface driven as opposed to the version here, which is more code driven.
Yep. Raw data.
Yeah.
Great.
Next one. Okay, so there's another way to get specific about an object. So if let's say I right click. Oh yeah, that's a trick. If you hold the shift key on your keyboard and you right click any object in your project, you get 4 secret menu items. One of them is copy path to clipboard, and there's others, and also copy WAQL query to clipboard. So we can use that.
Nice.
And then I'm going to paste it over here. So now we have our WAQL query, which is actually a path. So we have only the object name in the path, surrounded by double quotes. And we get this exact object here in the results. Maybe, yeah, it's a bit a long string. I'm going to use maybe health. It's going to be a shorter string to fit more on the screen. So health, one object. Let's say we are interested in obtaining the children of health. So there's a way in WAQL to diverge from the object. So we can say select children. So now instead of getting the object, we are getting the children. So we have 4 children, which are found here. Same objects as yeah.
Nice, and that also goes in the other direction.
Yeah, I could also say select parent. So it's going to tell me, oh, player is the parent.
Cool.
So parent is one object above, but I can also say ancestors, which are all the parents up to the default work units.
Great.
And I can also go the other direction, so descendants. So all the children if I expanded everything.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so that's how to go to somewhere else. So we started somewhere and we go somewhere else with the select keyword. And I can also go in different directions. For example, select output bus. So now we're taking the output bus reference and we're going to it. So we have to get the bus here called player, which I can confirm here is the bus found for this object. So that's everything that I've shown so far. It is not new. It's been in there for since WAQL exists. But now we're going to go a bit somewhere else on the new features we added in the new release. So in the previous version, we could say select effect 0. Because if you remember before in 22.1 and previous, we had 4 effect slots, only 4 and exactly 4. And they were named effect 0, effect 1, effect 2, effect 3. So if you wanted to access the effect 0, you could use that. Same thing as output bus, basically. It was a reference. Now it doesn't work because we have now a variable list of effects. So we have any number of effects. So how do we access effects now? Well, I could use a S, of course. This object doesn't have effects, so well, we could find an object that has effects. So where effects. Then how do I specify? So I could use any. Aha. So that's a new feature in new version. So when we have, we call them accessors, an accessors that represents multiple objects, like fx, it represents multiple objects. You could say if you can add a function to it. So in this case, the any function is going to tell you true if it's not empty. So where any effect, so I could actually copy paste this in the Project Explorer and confirm. So we have our results here. I could click this one. Aha, we have an effect here. It's confirmed. Very good. So we just learned about the any function. Maybe we're looking for an object with EQ, because yeah, it would be interesting. So the any function, as we see right now, it has 0 parameter. It's the parenthesis with empty. But we could say, well, before.
Where do we find the things that fit inside of those parentheses?
Yeah, we'll learn about that, but we need to understand what's an effect. So each effect in Wwise is, we still call them slots. So you get slots here in the effect list. Each slot is multiple things. So we get a render button or render property, a bypass property, and also a reference to the actual effect. Here is shelving EQ. It's because when you edit the effect, it's its own object. So the effect itself is the object, but the slot itself is another object. So the slot has the render and bypass and a pointer to the effect. So if we want to look for EQ, the any function is actually looking at the effect slot. So because the FX here returns a list of FX slots. What I can do, for example, is say render equal true. So then it's going to give me any object with render equal true. But if I want to look for the EQ, then I need to look at the effect. And it has, the effect itself as a plugin name, and in this case, it's EQ. So now we have our effect. So how do we get there? So there's a few things that where those names come from. So let's search for WAQL reference. So it's the right one. Okay, it's our WAQL. Good. So WAQL reference is a big page, and there's a lot of things in it. And what we are interested here is scroll here. So there's plenty of different accessor, we call them, and in particular there's plugin name. We have it here.
Great.
So what you have access is all those accessors plus the one that are defined in the object reference. So if we were looking at the music cues, for example, so you have also access to all the properties in Wwise. It's a combination of the two. And we saw earlier also the name, the notes, so those are also accessible here. So that's how we can get the effects.
Well, and what I loved about it is when you were looking at the plugin name accessor, right next to it was a very simple illustration of using that. So there was the $sign where plugin name equals, to me, just having that handy, you can reach for it. And from there, you can start extending your WAQL queries by using multiple accessors.
Mm-hmm. And if we go back to the object reference here, we also have the FX slot object. So we see the FX slot object as indeed a bypass, an effect, RTPC, and render. The 4 things that you can access.
Right.
Okay, so I think maybe we would like to, so we got the query here, and maybe we would like to see the effect in the results, because we see the pitch and volume, but we don't see the effects. So let's type effects with a S here. So that's also new in this version. So now in the results of WAQL, you can get arrays of things. So effects, for instance, here we have list of effects. However, what we get at the moment is not very interesting, because we get the effect slot list, but for each slot we get the ID. So not much usable information. Well, ID is still useful if you're programming, because you get access to the actual ID of the object, but for reference here, not very useful. So that's why we added a way to specify which element you would like to access on the effects. Because we have control over the what element of the object here we want to return, but we don't have control over what element of the effects. But there's a way to get that.
Okay.
So there's a special syntax where, you can specify which property you want. So name, or plugin name, let's say. No, it's the effect dot plugin name, and let's say the path. Okay, So now it's more convenient. So we get, instead of getting the ID, we get the exact data that we're asking for. So where the effect is on your project, and also what type of effect it is. So very data oriented.
We've got minds blowing over in the chat. Thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, this is a great way to reach into your project, get information back out of it that you can then use, whether it's just to validate that that your authoring is consistent, back to having those strict guidelines, you know, returning results from your project to say, oh, actually, these things shouldn't be routed to the master audio bus. There's a great example there of being able to get that information back and just at a glance being able to validate that that your project is conforming to the expectations that you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's plenty of things you can use. We could use the count. The count is another function. It's a bit very similar to the any function. So the any function was returning true or false if it meets the criteria. Now the count is returning the number of effects. So we have 2 effects here, 1 effect.
And with the ability in 23.1 to add almost unlimited effects to every object, maybe you want to keep an eye on how many effects folks are putting onto objects in your project so that you can ensure that nobody's blowing the CPU budget by instantiating 10 harmonizers on a single object. Just not that that happened to me in real life, but it could.
So that's the query where I say, give me all the object that has effect count greater than 1, and return me which plugin they are using. So fx.effect plugin name. Now we have all the effects that those objects are using. I wonder why this one is only 1, but something weird here. But yeah.
Interesting. 100 futz boxes, please, is coming from the chat, and I couldn't agree more. So let's just crank up a quick WAAPI script to instantiate 100 fuzz boxes on each object, and let's hear how that sounds.
Yeah, the master bus had an empty slot actually, so that's why we got spotted.
Perfect. Hey, a question coming back from the WAAPI side of things. Markers. Could you add custom cues from markers purely in WAAPI? So read into a WAV file to the markers in a WAV file and use those to create markers at those positions?
Yeah, markers and custom cues are 2 different systems. So custom cues are found in the music hierarchy. And with the music, you can get callbacks in your game for custom cues. Markers are found in the sounds or audio source objects. Yes, you can create markers and cues through WAAPI. Markers on audio source, and on the game side, you'll also get callbacks for the markers. Does that answer your question?
Maybe the extension of that is if I have markers in my WAV file, can I use WAAPI to convert those to custom cues?
Oh, okay. Markers. Okay, so you import a WAV file with markers in the music system.
Yeah.
Yeah. You would need a way to extract the markers from the WAV file.
Gotcha. So if you could get marker information, maybe from your DAW or from whatever the export was, use that, the marker locations for that WAV file, feed it into a WAAPI script as an argument to create those custom cues.
Yeah, and Python is very rich in terms of tools to read WAV files and get markers. For example, you can get modules that's going to do that for you.
Okay. It sounds like the answer is with a little bit of elbow grease that you for surely can make that work with WAAPI.
Yeah. Okay, so next, okay, we'll talk a bit about events. So we saw a bit what we can do with effects. We can get back to the from type events. So because yeah, events are important aspect of a project, and that's something you want to get control over. So in the earlier versions of WAQL, you could start from event like this and use the select keyword to access, for example, the children of the event. Because if you recall the event as actions, as children, you can have multiple actions in a single event. And from the, we can confirm over here. So if I go to the event system, I click one, what I get is a row. Each row is an action, and there's a field on the action called target. Let's take this one. Target is the object that is being played. So I can select here target because it's a property on the action. Now what I get is the list of objects that are being referred by events. However, there's a problem with this query is, well, we get the targets, but we lost the connection between the event and the targets. We don't know which target belongs to which event. And we'll try to fix that. So instead of doing the select here, because the select, yeah, we lose track of where it comes from. So instead of doing the, select children, select target can be also rewritten with as select children.target, because the target is equivalent of a select. It's just a chain of we follow this accessor. So instead of using this, I'm going to remove this and put it as a return value here. So now we get same query basically, but instead of accessing the target in the query itself, we access the target in the results. So the good thing about that is now we maintain the connection between the event and the targets. In same fashion as we saw for the effects, we can say return me an object that has, say, the path and the type. So now we know exactly what type of object is being referred by the event, and also where it is in our project. So that's new. However, if you're in the WAAPI land and you're accessing those things, well, that one. Well, type and name are short, they're easy to access. But if you're in Python and you want to access this thing, it's a bit more long. So there's also a way for convenience to get a simpler version. So we can say as targets. So we basically rename this thing with a new name. So now we get a more friendly name in the output. So those are our targets. One thing maybe would be interesting is to know which WAV files are being used by our events. So now we have the targets, but we could try to get the WAV files. To get that, well, we can. Okay. So target itself points to an object, and this object can be a sound, but can also be a container. So what we're looking for is the list of sounds. So there's another special syntax. So we saw earlier the curly brace that returns a new object, but there's also the square bracket that returns an array. So because here we're interested in the actual target that is being returned, and this is called this, but we also are interested into the descendants of the target. Oops, descendants. So which, and then we need to filter where type equals sound. Okay, that's becoming complex. Sorry about that. So what I'm doing here is I'm listing all the sounds that are being referred by our target. And we could say I want to return the original file path, like this. Original file path. Oh, I think I destroyed my query. No, I did something wrong. Oh, okay, that's better. So now we have the list of original files.
Awesome.
That are being referred for each of the events.
Well, and the query you just cooked up could be the kind of thing a developer would use to validate that these WAV files are being used in the game, and maybe I have WAV files in my project that are not. So you could use something like that as a way to clean up your project if that was important, or you were moving on to carrying a project forward into a new iteration. Valuable to be able to see what's at the end of that rainbow from an event to WAV file perspective.
Mm-hmm. So if we search for original here, so we even have the relative path, so less noisy. So I made a bit the query simpler now. So I removed a few things. So since we can reduce it a bit. So children. So we start from the children of the event. We go on the target, and then we ask for descendants. And for each descendant, we get the path of the original. That's shorter. Now we get our events, and for each event, we get the WAV file that are being used.
Yeah. So from the chat, this is how you use WAQL. And a question coming out. So that was an enthusiastic hooray for you. You're like power user, and we're watching this happen. Can WAQL access content from the SoundBank editor window? So can you reach into SoundBanks and get information back?
A little bit. So if I return SoundBanks, so this is going to give me basically the list of SoundBanks. Oops, no S. So, and then what we can do from that is go here on the object reference and search for SoundBank, and we can find what is being exposed. So as you see, we don't have the inclusion list. So the inclusion list at the moment is not accessible in WAQL. There's a WAAPI function for it. So if you're on the WAAPI API, you can call get inclusion. However, WAQL doesn't expose it yet.
Cool. All right. Good answer.
Yeah. Last thing is the RTPC. RTPC. Same thing as we saw with FX. I can do the
RTPC.
RTPC from so from type sound where RTPC. Yes.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay, so any sound that has RTPC in my project, 14 of them. So if I copy this over here, I'm going to get 14 match here in my audio hierarchy. And if I click one of them, I can confirm we have an RTPC.
Nice.
Yeah. So there's a few lists like that you can access, new functions. And yeah, if you're interested in learning more in details, there's the blog. Also, there's a blog about that. It goes more in detail, lists everything that is accessible with in-depth example of using most of what we discussed today and more. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, two great resources for folks to reach into the authoring application, get information out of it using WAQL, querying the project for these different aspects. A lot of different uses for that, right? Validating what's been done, taking that information back into a WAAPI script and now being able to execute on those things using WAAPI. So finding all of the objects that have EQ and making a batch change on them, or arranging things in your hierarchy a certain way according to how it's been authored. Lots of different ways that people can dig into that. And like you said, a lot of resources there. I'll also mention for folks out there who will jump off from here to dig into these resources, you can look at our YouTube channel. We've got a ton of resources here. We've got a 1-minute Wise about finding objects using WAQL, connecting your game with WAAPI and Python. We've got another deep dive with the Wise Authoring API and Wise Authoring Query Language that Bernard did with us last year, bringing you up to speed, along with a bunch of other examples there. And dig in, because we go all the way back to 4 years ago when Bernard and I first started live streaming together and went hands-on with WAAPI as it was just coming out as a platform for folks to extend their workflows using Wise. And that is just the tip of the iceberg, because when we look across the community out there, we've got all kinds of great examples of extending workflows with WAAPI, using WAAPI with text-to-speech system. Chase Steele talking about Strata and Rewise and how Rewise uses WAAPI to get sounds from Reaper to Wise. We got a great community contribution. Someone out there using WAAPI to trigger events from Reaper markers. So another like cross application implementation using WAAPI. Another one where someone has taken and using Reaper to streamline how they've created a combat sound design demo. And as well as just a hands-on with doing scripting, event creation, trimming long sources, and setting random container properties. So just a ton of great resources out there for folks who want to get started with, building things outward from their projects. So.
Yeah, and if you're a C++ person and you're interested into learning about how to use Wise in WAAPI in C++, there's the Wise open source project on GitHub, and yeah, it's very powerful, and it's a good example to learn C++ and WAPI together.
Awesome. All right, Bernard. Thanks so much for taking the time today to walk us through WAPI. It's been great to get the deep dive perspective. We had some folks in the chat who really enjoyed watching you work. And so thanks to folks who followed along. Great to have you and your questions today.
Cool. It was a pleasure.
Great resource, and congratulations on all the new features as part of 23.1. It's great to see WAPI and WAQL continue to evolve forward. I know that there's more in store as we are using that tool internally, and we're hearing from folks out there who are leveraging WAPI for their own workflows, and so continue to grow it alongside the community.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, Happy New Year. 2024 off to a great start here on Wise Up on Air, hands-on. We'll see you next time. Thanks for stopping by. All right. Take care.